Hey, what's up? I'm Strange Girl. I'm an alt pop singer-songwriter from Dallas, Texas, and I've got my first single from my new album, Thank You to Everyone I Have Loved, coming out on Friday, March 1st. Very exciting, just 2 days away.
Thank You to Everyone I've Loved is a concept album. Can you tell me a little bit more about the story?
Yeah. The concept revolves around a high school sweetheart couple who goes to prom, ends up getting pregnant, and they decide to get married. Unfortunately, she loses the baby, and the groom has trouble dealing with that traumatic event to the point where he burns their house down with himself inside. And that is the climax of the story, and the bride is sort of left to move on and begin her life anew.
Some heavy subject matter. How did you come up with the story behind it?
So the song that's coming out on Friday, actually, That House of Mine, I wrote not even having the idea of a concept album in mind. And it sort of was the catalyst for this whole story that I then used Pinterest boards and quote carousels on TikTok as inspiration to kind of find the rest of the story, the vibe, and sort of like that ongoing theme of it's kind of got like a 50s housewife plus like old timey classic horror and 1920s flapper, all these kinds of different things that I like saw on Pinterest, and they all kind of came together into this weird and sad story.
Nice. What like specifically about this like idea of having an overarching kind of story that came to you from this particular song? Like what exactly drew you to a concept album specifically?
I was really tired of writing about my own life and sort of found it starting to be detrimental to my mental health. And I didn't really want to like be in the angry diss track place anymore. So I thought that writing a story that was like completely separate from myself about a character who is not me would be kind of a really good creative exercise, as well as just like a way to be creative without having to like hurt myself, which I feel like a lot of times as artists, it's like kind of glorified to be in that like world of depression and like dealing with your emotions. And I feel like there's a way to feel those emotions and put them into your art with while it's still being safe and healthy.
Yeah, I think there's I believe it's Jack Kerouac quote about how being a writer is just sitting down at the typewriter and bleeding. And that's kind of definitely the story of being an artist is that all of most artists' songs are so intensely personal that I've never heard someone specifically say that writing these really hyper personal songs was detrimental to like health and stuff, but I
Yeah.
can certainly imagine how it would be.
Yeah.
Um, and I on our channel, the last video we just did was one about Taylor Swift, and that's someone who like, had been so hyper personal. And I know that like some of the more recent albums were less personal, like I think it was
Mhm.
Folklore and Evermore were more conceptual.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine there's that element of um it's a lot to put it out everything you're feeling and
Right.
specifically about everyone you're feeling.
Right. Well, and it got to the point too where like people who knew me would listen to my songs and be like, "Ooh, who's this one about?" Instead of like really listening to the song, like it became more about like the gossip behind the song than the actual like art of it all, which I feel like often happens with Taylor Swift and like Olivia Rodrigo as well. And I was just like, I don't want that to continue happening. So let me just squash the idea that this could be about anyone that I know or anything that I've experienced and just write an album that's like something completely creative and made up.
It also seems to be a problem that's much more specific to female songwriters than it is
Sure.
to male songwriters. Like, obviously, I still see that speculation for male songwriters, but it never seems to overshadow the music itself the way it does for female artists.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree.
What do you hope listeners take away from the album?
While it is a story that they can follow, I think there's another story going on, a bigger picture that is about how the point of life is learning to let go of it and to just not be so angry about things that have happened to you and to let things happen and go through them and be okay with that. And I think that is like the main message of the album that I want people to take away from listening to it, especially this song that's coming out on Friday is kind of the core idea. Like the main lyric in the song is, I can't save you, I can only love you right. And it's just the idea of you can't let things get to you so much. You can only do your best. And that's something that you can be proud of at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally. Um, so you just touched on That House of Mine, which is the lead single from this album. Can you tell the viewers a little bit more about where it fits into the story?
Yeah, it's actually the climax of the story. It's the second to last song on the album, and it comes after what will be the second single from the album called Love and Violence, which is this big 80s pop hit. And so it's really contrasting to like the experimental nature and slowness of this song that's coming out on Friday. And it comes as like a shock and surprise when you listen to the album through. Um, yeah, so it's the biggest moment of the story while also sort of being like the most calm and tame song on the album, which is really interesting.
So considering that it is the climax of the story and considering it's one of the calmer songs on the album, what made you decide to have it be the lead single?
To be honest, I was just really proud of it. I think I've said the most while saying the least with the lyrics. You know, they're not flowery. Um, Sometimes in my songwriting, I tend to want to just say a lot and make sure the message gets across by saying more. And I think I really held back in this song and chose the right words as opposed to saying any. And I'm really proud of that. And also, this is the first song that I have completely solo produced. And usually I work with one of my friends who's an amazing producer, and we do everything together 50-50. And we really collaborate. And this was kind of one where I was the lead producer on it. And then he kind of just came in and did some tweaks and things like that. So I'm really proud of that on my producing journey, which only started like maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. Um, so that just being really proud of it was what made me want it to be first and kind of like the new debut of this new era of Strange Girl. But also, I think it's just a really cool song. And like, I'm really inspired by artists that make like even semi experimental music, just like anything that's new and different, like Dijon or Ethel Kane or people like that who are kind of just like doing whatever they want, like no rules or anything like that. And so I was really inspired by them in making this one too, because there's not really any like classic elements to this song. It just kind of is what it is. So I'm excited about it. I hope people like it.
I like it, so I
Thanks.
think other people will as well. Um, what made you decide to produce it yourself versus having this more collaborative approach like you've said you've had previously?
Yeah, I think it was just one of those things where I made this song in like 3 hours one night, and it was just kind of like that thing you get into where it just pours out of you, and you're like, I know exactly what this song needs to be, and here it is. I'm gonna do it all. So like even the vocal take that we used in this song and the one that everyone will hear is actually the first and only take of the song that was ever done, and it's because it's from the original 3 hour session upstairs in my house. So yeah, I think it was a really important step in my producing journey. And yeah, I'm excited to be collaborating with my friend on all the other songs on the album. So
It's neat because as you've been talking about the song is in so many ways deeply personal while also having that sense of detachment. And so I think
Yeah.
that's something that like will really resonate with listeners in terms of like, yeah, it's not about a personal experience, but it is still so personal that they'll have that element.
Right, right, exactly.
So in the past, I know you and I have kind of discussed that Strange Girl is almost a bit of a concept persona as well, and you mentioned a new era of it. Can you give our viewers a bit more insight into that?
Yeah, so I created Strange Girl because I wanted my own life to be separate, which I guess is kind of like a theme. I wanted my own life to be separate from my music career. So that was the impetus for creating her. But then she sort of became this thing, this entity, like you were saying, on its own. And Strange Girl lives in this place that we call Strange World, aptly named. And the idea going forward is that every album that I make is actually about a different character who lives in Strange World. So, for example, Thank You to Everyone I Have Loved revolves around the bride, part of the bride and groom. And then going forward, we'll see who else we encounter in this universe. But I love the world building aspect that's sort of become more and more popular. I guess it's always been a thing though, because like when we really think about it, like Prince was world building and people that came before him were world building. And then we got Lady Gaga, who's like the queen of this era of world building. And I just think that's really cool that it's become more and more popular. And I wanted to be able to contribute my own world to that thing.
Lady Gaga was who was at the top of my mind as you were talking about it. Um, it's interesting in the ways that like world building has always, like you mentioned, has been an existing thing. David Bowie with Ziggy Stardust, another good example. But it's funny how that has never been necessarily like as intentionally
Mm-hmm.
like curated in the music industry when you think about how uh lucrative for
Right.
in full plainness it is in other things. You think about um all of these different IP that Harry Potter or
Mhm.
whatever it may be, where you start out with one medium, but then it becomes movies, it becomes video games, it becomes Harry Potter world, etc. And so it's interesting that music hasn't embraced that as fully, at least from a commercial aspect, when you think about how much both creatively and commercially there is for an artist there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a huge part of it too, and actually something that I'm working on in my thesis right now is that like one of the main reasons world building is so, like you said, commercially successful and also creatively successful is because it gives a place for people to like have a collective identity and unite. Like all these people, like the Swifties, Lady Gaga's Little Monsters, like we have all these names for fans of an artist who has like built a very specific brand around them because that's really all a world is just a brand. So yeah, it's super interesting when you that people don't, I mean, I think like people are thinking about that more, especially like since Lady Gaga, that's become more and more of a thing. But yeah, I think it's super important to have like a little bubble around you that is like, this is who I am. And honestly, I'm a symbol of something for the people who listen to me. I think it's really cool. And that's what I'm working on my thesis right now is like, that's why people end up becoming iconic and standing the test of time is because they become a symbol of something larger than themselves because they've created this whole like universe for people to be able to fall into.
I think there's also something to it in terms of like it becomes more accessible in some ways, So like with Harry Potter, for example, there are a lot of people who love those movies who've never read the books because they're not
Right.
readers. Or you think about Star Wars, they with different things in terms of different types of media and and how different types of media appeal to people. For example, I am not a Star Wars person. Ian, though, my husband, is a huge Star Wars person. And the only real medium that ever got me to be able to enjoy it with him was the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order video game, because I love
Oh
video
yeah, yeah, yeah.
games.
Uh-huh.
And the story in that one captured me, and the medium captured me. And so like I still can't really do the movies or the TV shows as much, but that allowed me to participate in something with him a bit. And so
Mhm.
obviously I think there are very few people who would just say, I don't like music. But at the same time, like it does, having these different elements and these different ways to make your music accessible and inclusive to people certainly
Mhm.
allows you to reach a wider audience.
Absolutely. And in my live shows for this album, people can actually, it's on my Instagram as well, but people can actually go look at a visual diary of all the songs. So there's like that visual component to it that sort of brings you into the world. And the other visual content that we're creating for the album, hopefully people will be able to, like you said, be able to enjoy it in different ways that's more accessible and inclusive, and not just like, here, listen to this song, period, which is great. And people love music. Obviously I love music, but I think it's so fun to be able to like just encompass the songs that you create with all this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that K-pop in particular kind of does really well in terms of like all of the different components that they use to really bring fans into things. Like they have like trading cards and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, and so it's neat to see the different ways that artists think about reaching fans and bringing them into the world that they are creating, whether that world is as intentional as Strangeworld or just, you know, kind of more broadly the artist's life and universe.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
You have a background in musical theater. Personally, as a former theater kid, I can really hear some of that training in this song. But how do you think it affects your music and the way you think about songwriting?
Oh, I mean, in every way, yeah. My undergrad is in musical theater, and I spent a long time in that world after I graduated before sort of moving into the music industry and starting at Berkeley. But yeah, I think it's the theatricality of Strange Girl is obviously very clear that it's, sort of camp in a way, and loud and vibrant. But I think what you said about the storytelling, like definitely in songwriting, I've always had sort of like tendency to go with a very intense narrative in songs and want to tell a story as opposed to just writing a song that is catchy, which can be great, but that's just not really my thing. So I think theater has definitely helped me in understanding how to create a story and how to put that out into a world in a way that people understand and can enjoy. So yeah, I mean, I don't do theater much anymore, but I do still really love it. And I think I love to hear that it shows in my music still, because I think that's also really sweet that like that part of me is still influencing this next chapter.
Yeah, there's something in the way that you project your voice on the song that like as a theater kid I was like, that's coming from the diaphragm right there. Like I
Right.
can
Like she knows Sally Bowles. Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Totally. Yeah, I think too, like it's so interesting, like just from a singer's perspective, like I spent so long doing musical theater, and the way that your voice does change in different venues, like the way that I'm in a party band, and the way that I sing there is very different than the way that I sing as Strange Girl, than the way that I sing as a theater artist. So it's super interesting.
Yeah, and I think, also like in in terms of our conversation that we just had about world building and stuff, I think that also probably in a lot of ways comes from a theater background in terms of like your intentionality of building that world in a way that like someone without the theater background might not be as intentional about. Because in some ways, you have created a musical here. You have a complete
Mhm.
story that this music tells, and it's a very intentional story. And it almost is like a musical. You could.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I performed the album at like a theatrical venue a couple months ago, and the audience was a lot of theater people. And one of my friends was like, this should be a musical. Like you should make this a musical. And I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Now I gotta make this a musical. But it's really true. Like it honestly is like um, a little mini Alice by Heart, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, it's neat. It's really cool.
thank
Um, and then on a totally different topic at this point. In our Q&A that we did last year, you mentioned that your favorite song you've written is called Ethan Craft. If you're listening, I love you. Do you have any plans to release that song at some point in the future?
Actually, no. I play it at every single live show that I do, though. So if you ever want to hear it, I guess you just have to come see me live. It is the thing about it is it's so much more fun to play it when people are there with you because if you are our age or around there, you will get every single tiny little joke that's in this song. There are so many Disney deep cuts that people like pick up on and enjoy. So yeah, I don't have any plans to record, but I do play it every single time I play live. So
Maybe it needs a live version then. You release it as a
that's true.
live
That's
recording.
true. Okay, I'll think about that.
Maybe one of the characters in the Strange World is a big Disney Channel fan as well.
That's true. Well, I'm trying to do like every album will be sort of a different genre as well. So this is alt pop, and then the next one we're planning to do is rock. So maybe I'll have to get to like a singer-songwriter eventually, and then she'll be in there.
Yeah, or pop, straight pop with the Disney knees. I've seen a lot of videos of
Yes, we'll
people
do a
doing kind of
cover
a
of La
Disney.
La Land by Demi Lovato. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned the next one that you have planned is rock. Do you have a character and thoughts on storyline? Anything that you can share? If not too soon to share, no
I
worries.
don't have I don't have a storyline yet. We've just started sort of devising it as thank you to everyone I've loved is coming not to a close, but we're starting to get to the point of letting the baby go. So so no official story to release yet. But I will say that I am hoping that it will be kind of a total 180 from Thank You to Everyone I've Loved and have a completely different tone and vibe and yeah, we'll see. I think that's all I have to say about that at this moment.
Those were my questions that I had pre-planned. I don't know if there's anything else that you specifically would like to touch on, mention in terms of like shows coming up, where people can find you, things like that.
So on Instagram, I'm at Strange Girl Music. I post most of my stuff there. I'm also on TikTok, although I'm not as active as I used to be, because here's some Devin, aside from Strange Girl lore, is that I used to have a musical theater TikTok that was popular during the pandemic. And so now I'm trying to erase that memory and start anew as Strange Girl. So pending the TikTok, but you can find me at Strange Girl Music on Instagram, and then I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Amazon, anywhere you get your music. Come and follow me. We'll have a great time.
Awesome. And any shows coming up?
No shows coming up at the moment, but once we get the album out, we will be having an album release party in Dallas somewhere. So if you are a Texan, come on down.